I always said that drag queens are the gay version of a live band in a straight pub where people come along, the band plays, and yes, I'm here to watch the drag show, but I might also be here to sidle up to a guy who's standing beside me or to meet some friends, or so we're sort of the background to a lot of people's stories.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories that they created there, and the people that they used to know. This week, we are joined by queer Sydney royalty. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. That is a pretty lofty claim to make, but I stand by it. And after you listen to this episode, you will too. Mitzi MacIntos is the drag persona of the artist Graeme Browning. Graeme moved to Sydney from Canberra in the late 80s and quickly established himself as a powerhouse performer, full of the typical down-to-earth Australian wit and wearing the most fantastical costumes. But as we know, it takes more than a little bit of humor and some fancy duds to become a legend. And what made Mitzi stand out from everyone else was her championing of the community and the fact it was obvious that she really cared about people and she cared about what it was she was doing. And it was at the Imperial Hotel, which at the time was owned by Dawn O'Donnell, that Mitzi got the opportunity to really let loose and create big, bold, exciting drag shows, which helped her fall in love with that space. In this episode, we talk all about how Graeme first met his husband at the Imperial Hotel, no less, the power that Mitzi found in community, and we also take the time to be a little educational, teaching you Aussie slang words like root and thongs, and maybe a few others in there I can't quite remember. But before we get going, a very, very quick trigger warning. Graeme uses the T word in this interview to talk about his experiences as a drag queen, which I have left in because I think it's wholly appropriate to the conversation. But do use discretion when listening to the episode, and if you disagree with my decision and you want to reach out and let me know why, I am totally open to having that conversation, so please do get in touch. Right, let's get into the episode.
You know, everybody has a time in their life where they've developed a drag persona. And it's not necessarily drag, but you look at people like newsreaders and you look at people who, even the way you act in different situations, the way you talk at work, the way you talk at home, you're a different person and you find a different part of your personality
To tap into, yeah.
to apply to different areas. And with drag, what I tried very hard to do was put a line down the center of it, and I had Mitzi on one side and Graeme on the other. And funnily enough, Graeme was a very colourful young gay man. And when I came to Sydney, when I was socialising, I was making my own outfits. I was printing my own fabric. You know, one of my outfits I went out one night with was completely cow print. And then one night, my outfit was based around dinosaurs. And I had safety pins all over my outfit, and I'd pinned dinosaurs to my shoulders and all this sort of stuff. And so we had themed outfits, and I had jackets that I'd made out of bedspreads and all this sort of stuff. And as I started to do drag, that became my choice of attire as a drag queen. And I started to buy more conservative clothing to wear as Graeme.
Oh, interesting.
And so I definitely had two sides of my wardrobe. So the colourful thing became what I did in drag. And then I tried to put on this persona of being slightly more butch and slightly more, and not standing out and not being noticeable, so
Uh-huh.
that I could walk into venues and be a normal person.
And so do you think that's because Mitzi fulfilled that part of your personality that wanted to be the center of attention? Or do you think that Graeme was trying to counterbalance some of the femininity that people were placing upon you because of Mitzi?
I think the latter. I was always very confident,
Uh-huh.
but that confidence diminished in Graeme and was certainly much more there in Mitzi. And I think I tried to balance that by trying to find my own style as Graeme, because I didn't want to be what I saw as the sad characters of drag queens
Yeah.
out of drag, because I would see these people shuffle into venues with their drag bag and they still had half their makeup on from the night before. They were just wearing a pair of shorts and, thongs on their feet, and they
Oh,
just
we should say for international listeners, thongs are
flip flop,
flip-flops.
flip flop, and they had jandals or sandals on their feet. So I felt like I had to try and put more effort into Graeme to give Graeme some sort of personality. And also that was why I very much had Mitzi as the office job and Graeme as the social position. And I
Ah.
said to everybody, my name's Graeme, my name's not Mitzi. I'm not in drag, I'm not working at the moment. Call me Graeme. And I tried very hard to make sure that there was something that people might be attracted to, because
Ah.
having a relationship and something happening outside of drag was very important to me.
Okay, so very quickly, what are your top 3 tips for someone like me who may want to put on a butch persona next time they go to a club?
Um, well, generally mine was hands in your pocket, because I
Okay,
tended to be a bit too much of
too
this,
flappy otherwise. Yep,
too
okay.
flappy. Um, Generally don't speak too much, because again, I'm way too gay when I talk too much. So don't talk too much. And I guess your drink of choice would have to be something like beer rather than gin and tonic. But look, one of the things that I love about the gay scene these days, or just youth these days, is this phenomenal acceptance of difference.
Yeah.
I love the fact that there is now a gender spectrum, that there is now, this acceptance of fuck everybody, I'm just going to be who I want to be. I'm comfortable. And back in my day, you had to still fit into boxes.
Yes,
You
yeah.
still had to be you were either gay or you were butch gay or you were whatever. But these days, I love the idea that you can be whoever you want to be, however you want to be, whatever you want to be, and fuck this being in a box, because I don't want to be.
Mm.
And I think that's a fantastic thing, because I don't think that was available to us back in my day.
Yeah, yeah. And I love it too. And I love that people feel so emboldened and empowered to be themselves. You can tell there's a but coming. Sorry, there's always a but with me. The thing that worries me, that scares me, is that like we've had periods of time when there's been this playing with genders, there's been this kind of broadening of people's understanding of genders. And then suddenly following that, like if we talk about like the new romantics era, for instance, then following that, fashions change and everything becomes really dour and boring. And I'm really worried about that dour and boring bit coming around the
Just the
corner.
fashion, or
Well, I don't know. Like, there's like the fashion kind of influences people's thinking, and there's a whole range of knock-on effects. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm being
no.
a wet blanket.
At the moment, the backlash towards the trans community and outside of the trans community worries me.
Mm,
And it's amazing how easily all of these hard fought for
yes.
freedoms can be
Yeah.
taken away so easily. But I also don't believe that we will ever let them get taken away completely. And if you come for me, I will fight you. So I think moments like this are important for us to stand up and come together and be like, no, we're not going to let this
Galvanize.
happen again. This has happened before. And I think that was what was amazing about my time when I came out and, the HIV/AIDS crisis and all of that, was that it was so incredible for the community that we all fought together and we all fought for each other, and we became so much stronger because of it. And I think there will always be a minority that try to bring us down and try to change us. And sometimes it'll become stronger, but I believe and I hope that it would never, put us back to where we were.
What's especially difficult about what's happening at the moment is that lots of the people that are trying to bring us down are inside the house.
Which I find phenomenal. I think to myself,
astounding.
When a gay man fights against trans rights, I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You have absolutely no idea. Just, go back and do your history and shut up and sit down. It's just amazing.
Just the disconnect. Yeah, it's really odd. Anyway, sorry. So Mitzi, we're still talking about Mitzi. So were you kind of ashamed of Mitzi? I know that's a really blunt way to ask it. Sorry.
No. No. It was probably more towards the middle of my rise to fame that I became proud of what I was achieving. I was always very proud of what I did, but I also knew the damage that a drag career can do to your personal life. And I remember one time we had my birthday. It was a Sunday night, and I got drunk on stage. And, generally whenever it was someone's birthday, they would get the person performing drunk, and out would come the roller skates, and we'd all change costumes, and the
Health
shows
and
would
safety,
just become an absolute mess. Yeah. Oh, yeah, no. And I was really, really drunk, and I rocked up to Signal in Oxford Street, which was a fuck bar at the time, and I was sort of standing there, and I'm like leaning up against a wall, being all damn fucking sexy, and trying very hard to see straight because I was quite drunk. And somebody came up and went, "Are you Mitzi?" I went, "Oh, fuck off," because the last thing I wanted while I was sitting there with my leg up thinking, "Hello, who wants a bit of this?" was somebody coming up saying, "Are you Mitzi?" I'm like, so that was always damaging to Graeme, and I knew that Mitzi could be that person that would bring me undone in a situation where I, thought I might get a bit.
So first of all, my first follow-up question here is fuck bar a term that I should be using? Because I've never heard it before.
Isn't that what they were all? Maybe it was back in my day, but
I'm going to start introducing it into conversations.
Well, I don't know how many of them are left. Like, if you look at Oxford Street, there was the Den, there was Numbers, there was KKK, there was, Bodyline's gone.
Wait, there was a bar called KKK?
There was a bar called KKK.
Oh, fucking hell.
How do you not know? So it was Ken's Karate Club, KKK, Ken's Karate Club. And it was like a sauna, like it had a pool in the middle of it. It had a hot tub. That hot tub was more like chicken corn soup. It was the most disgusting hot tub you wouldn't hop in.
Strange viscosity. Yeah.
Very strange. Stench of bleach. But yeah, KKK was like a sauna out at Kensington.
And like, for some strange reason, they only had white people going there.
I saw a few different, when you think of it now, having a venue called, but nobody ever thought of it that way. Maybe it was just Australia's innocence.
Yeah. Then the second question I have is, did it ever work in reverse? Like, Mitzi was a cock blocker most of the time, but did anyone ever really want to get to know you or have sex with Graeme because of Mitzi?
No.
Oh.
There was always the availability of sex as Mitzi, because if you went up to the taxi club in drag, you were guaranteed a route anytime.
And for anyone listening, a route is sexual intercourse in Australian slang.
G'day.
Carry on.
Yeah, that old thing of why men like wombats, eats roots and leaves. So yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Thank you.
Yeah. So there was always the opportunity of drag sex, or we used to call it back in the day tranny trade.
Okay.
Because your trade is sex, especially rough trade is anybody that's a little bit like a builder would be rough trade if you had sex with a builder. But tranny trade was anybody that you picked up, or tranny fuckers were anyone that you picked up who was particularly attracted to trans women or drag queens. And they were always very available at the Taxi Club, which was the club for trans people in Sydney.
And so did you ever do that?
Yeah, I did it a few times, and it was scary because the funny thing about the men that sleep with drag queens is they like the idea of it, but the realization of it is more confronting to them. So my problem was sex for Graeme was different
Yes.
than what it should have been as sex as Mitzi. So what you're supposed to do is, even when you're standing there stark naked, dick in hand, hairy legs, you're supposed to be a girl.
Yes.
And you're supposed to act like a girl. And you're supposed to talk like a girl. Whereas as soon as I got naked, I became Graeme. And then that became gay sex to them, not trans sex.
Oh,
and so they would freak
okay.
out. So this one time I had a guy threaten me, and I jumped out of my car and ran.
Shit.
Left the car, ran up to the Surrey Hills police station and said, oh, this man's, and I didn't mention that I'd been having sex in the backseat of my car. And the police went back to me to the car, and there's the car, all the doors open, he'd gone. But the problem is that I'd confronted him and his sexuality, and he couldn't cope with the fact that I was a gay man. What he wanted was tranny sex.
Yeah.
And I wasn't what he wanted. And so that was where I made my mistake whenever it happened. But it happened a few times, and it's interesting. But you have to play the game. Yeah, you want my lady dick, don't you? So you have to play that whole game.
The whole time you have to kind of manage someone else's ego and expectations and worry about their well-being within the situation, which sounds like fuck that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd always be thinking about how to get away.
Yeah.
If you had to, because sometimes the situation could be. Then, that's what makes it exciting, isn't it?
There's only so much excitement. Right? But also, Graeme was looking for love.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because that whole thing of the drag element of it and drag affecting my personal life, I was approached by this girl at the Imperial Hotel in 1998, and she said to me, my brother really likes you. And I was out of drag. And I was like, who's your brother? Who told you that I'm fucking Mitzi? Go and tell your brother to fuck off. And that was Neil, who is still my husband.
Oh, romance, the start of something brilliant, telling his sister to go fuck herself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I told him to go fuck himself as well. When he sidled up to me at the bar to order, drink in hand to order another drink because he was trying to, pluck up the courage to chat to me.
Oh, wow.
And that was the Wednesday night. And then I said to him, we started chatting. And I said to him, look, I'm doing the New Year's Eve countdown tomorrow night. If you want to come up to the bar and meet me, we'll have a chat after work. And I remember that night I wore matte lipstick with no glitter because I thought I might get, a kiss at midnight if he was going to be there. And so that was we met on the Thursday and then on the Wednesday, and then on the Thursday he came up to the bar and we started chatting, and he's Welsh, so that's how I got to live in the UK for 12 years.
And so, you knew that he knew that you were a drag queen and that he fancied you anyway. Oh, sorry, that sounds a bit wrong, but he fancied you. Were you worried about that next night, him seeing you in drag?
No, because he'd seen me out of drag socializing and had decided that he would like to meet me and would like to chat to me. He'd seen the shows as well, but it wasn't until he actually saw me out of drag that he was interested in me apart from enjoying the shows.
Oh, okay.
And so then when we started chatting, it was evident from the beginning that it wasn't the drag side of me that he was interested in. In fact, that's the furthest from the possibility at all.
That's so nice and refreshing. But then, so what happened with Neil? I mean, obviously we know what happened with Neil, but what happened in the months following that?
So Neil was in Australia on a visitor's visa for 3 months. He'd left the UK, had been to South Africa and then come to Sydney. And again, he had heard about Sydney as being the gay capital of the Southern Hemisphere, and basically had sort of dilly-dallied around with being gay in the UK, but basically came out in Sydney. And
And so just so I'm clear, dilly-dallying, what does that involve exactly?
dilly-dallying involves cottaging,
Okay.
just, sly,
Just sticking it in, seeing what
dark
happens.
corners,
Okay,
sticking
all
it
right.
in, wherever there's an opportunity. Put your left hand in, put your left, this sort of thing, shake it all about. But yeah, so he hadn't really lived the gay lifestyle. And then, of course, hit Sydney and was like, oh, my God, this is the gay scene. And so his sister had come out to visit him while he was in Sydney. And then she went back to the UK just after New Year's. And then he had probably 2 months left on his visa. So in the next 2 months, we started dating. And then generally what happens with people who are on a short visa in Australia is they go to New Zealand, extend their visa, then come back to Australia. And they just continue to do that. So he did that probably 3 or 4 times. And during that time, we applied for interdependency, which at the time was
So romantic sounding.
So romantic. And then you have to then provide bills with your names on them, letters from people that are addressed to both of you, all that sort of evidence that shows that you are in a relationship. And then you have to deal with the interviews where primarily, especially back when we did it, it was all based around straight relationships. So it's talking about your living arrangements, your sleeping arrangements, your financial arrangements, all that sort of thing, and how intertwined they are. And you have to prove that you have a joint bank account, all that sort of thing. But of course, a lot of gay relationships don't operate that way.
No.
So it was we sort of had to open bank accounts and we backdated photos to prove that they were old and things like that. So yeah.
Wait,
it was interesting.
You faked photos? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So on your camera, you would change the date on the camera. You would take some photos, have them printed off at the local Kodak store, and then you'd use those as your. So
evidence.
We set up some birthday photos and some New Year's Eve photos. And
did you go around Sydney one day with 5 changes of clothes and pose for
that
different...
sort of thing. Yeah. We'd take photos in different venues with different people, and so we mocked up some different occasions.
So how come your hair hasn't grown between any of these photos?
Yes, how come? You look exactly the same. So yeah, there was a bit of that.
Well, so you were his first.
Well, I mean, he had a boyfriend when he met me, or somebody that he'd been seeing. But yes, I was. He certainly wasn't my first, but
did that ever freak you out?
No.
But
I didn't really think about it. It was sort of later. I mean, every now and then we joke about it, but it didn't really.
Oh, so you were never like, run, be free, sow your wild oats, and then come back if you love me.
No. I was always like, well, you can stop looking now.
Clearly not as dramatic as me.
His wild oats were mine, and that was fine. Do you want me to talk about the Imperial? So, as far as my lost space goes, for me, the Imperial was such an incredible time in my life because it became my hotel. It became the place where everybody went to see Mitzi. And it's the place where I was able to create my best drag, where I grew into myself as a performer. And the thing about a drag queen that becomes well known is that you become well known for the shows that you do, but also for the venue that you do them in. So it's Mitzi at the Imperial. It's the Imperial where Mitzi performs. It's Mitzi and the Imperial together. And the shows that I did, I was on the microphone. I was the person who was running the shows. And so that building became so much a part of my life. And I loved the building. I loved the Imperial. I loved the history of the Imperial and all that sort of thing. And so for me, I guess the reason for me it's a lost space is because what it was to the gay community and what it was in those days to me, and the way it centered itself around drag performances is very different to what it has now become. It's now become a very gentrified, mixed audience. They still do drag shows, but there's not really a stage like it used to be. It's very much a queer-friendly venue, but it's not what it was. And, much like other people talk about how venues change and the style of the venues change and the audience changes, the Imperial isn't what it used to be. And to me, it was just this gem of people coming out, people bringing their friends, people meeting friends, community growing and moving and coming back and moving away and all those sorts of things. And at the center of it was this social life that people had, which was the Imperial. And Sydney was changing and Sydney was growing. And, everybody talks about, the gay scene isn't what it used to be back then. And for me, that's what the Imperial was, because we had this incredible stage. We put together these amazing shows and the audiences there were so many people who became my friends. And I guess as far as a lost venue goes, the Imperial is still there. And from the outside, looks exactly like it did back in my day. But it's a very different building inside. And it's a beautiful venue and I love it, but it's not what the rough and ready Imperial was back in my day. It's not the boarded up windows and the smell of stale cigarette smoke from when the band came in and all that sort of thing. It was such an incredible life for me and gave me such incredible opportunities. I mean, to work in a venue where you have a stage, you have a backstage area, you have wings, you have a costume room upstairs, you have a storage room where you can make costumes that you could never fit in the back of a car. You couldn't travel with these costumes. And, we would, to be able to carry those costumes downstairs, do a show in them and then carry them back upstairs and store them in that venue. I did shows in that venue that I couldn't have done had I not had that storage space. And to walk into a venue at 8 o'clock at night as Graeme in a pair of shorts and flip-flops / thongs, put on my full face of makeup. I didn't have to travel. I could do it there at the venue, put my face on, go downstairs, do a show, go upstairs, take my face off and go and socialize was an incredible opportunity that Dawn O'Donnell afforded me that I don't think she realized she had. There's nowhere like that in Sydney now. People get changed in the accessible toilets in venues. They don't have, changing rooms. They don't have storage rooms for costumes. They don't have that sort of ability to put together incredible shows because of the space that we had.
Yeah. So let's finish on a cheesy note, okay?
Yes.
Very cheesy. So thinking about Graeme, the Graeme that came from Canberra to Sydney with his mate, if you had an opportunity to give him a little bit of advice, what would you say to him?
Take more risks. At one point, I was offered the opportunity to work with the costume department that was filming Star Wars in Sydney. And it was the week before I was opening a show at the Imperial. Brand new show. I had costumes I still had to make. And I had people that I performed with that I felt responsible for. I was their bread and butter. I was putting together the shows that paid their rent. And I had responsibility to the venues. I was doing 5-6 shows a week. And I just didn't feel like I could walk away from that. I wasn't comfortable taking that risk. And so I said no. And those sorts of things came up every now and then. Various opportunities where if I didn't feel such a huge sense of responsibility and I wasn't so tied to people and I could have been a little more ruthless and selfish, I possibly could have had different opportunities that would have taken me in different directions. But I restricted myself by not taking those opportunities. So I wish I could have been more of a risk taker. My automatic reaction whenever anything was asked of me was to say no when I should have said yes and dealt with the consequences later, rather than saying no and being like, because it was much safer to say no, because I could stay in my little bubble that I was comfortable in, that I excelled in, that I was well known in, that people loved me in, and I could be in that little bubble of security and not burst it. Whereas I should have stepped out of it and taken more opportunities and had more experiences that could have taken me in different directions, rather than there were so many other paths that I could have walked down, but I stayed on the one safe path in the middle. And I sometimes wish I hadn't.
Risks are scary.
Risks are scary. Yeah.
Do you have any memories of the Imperial Hotel or Queer Sydney or clubbing from your own scene that you want to share? Well, if you do, I would love to hear from you. I want to create the biggest online record of people's memories and stories of queer clubbing on my site. Go to lostspacesPodcast.com and find the section Share a Lost Space and tell me all about what it is you got up to. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where my handle is Lost Spaces Pod. Find out more about Mitzi by following them, him, them, she, her, on Twitter at Mitzi_MacIntosh. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you took the time to subscribe, leave a review on your podcast platform, or letting someone else know that the episode exists. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.